Hello, good day. My name is Chris Njoku. Today we'll be taking a holistic look at the Excel filter command. Filter can be applied to sort and hide data, make data analysis easier. Filter can be applied and as well deactivated. You can access your filter command in two different ways. First, you can click on your data tab and then you find your filter at the middle of your ribbon where you have sort and filter. That is one. You can as well access your filter command from your home tab. You click on the home tab and then you look at your extreme right where you find the sort and filter menu. Click on the drop down and then you find filter here. So that is that about finding the filter command. Now, moving forward, let's look at how to apply filter to a data set. This is a data set from A1 to E21. That is the data range. However, we're going to look at how we can apply filter to this data. One very important thing to note about filtering a data range is that we have to think about the header of the columns in the data range. What am I trying to say? Every data has a first row. And for you to effectively do your filter, you have to assign the first row for header. This data before us, you can see the first row contains ID, name, type 1, type 2, and total. This is not actually the data itself. These are just headers of the various columns of the data set. And so for us to apply filter to this data set, we have to select the first row. This is it. And then go to our data tab and then click on filter. So you can see we have successfully applied filter to this data. So how do you know if you have been able to apply your filter successfully? You see every cell in the first row having a drop down menu. So this is it. This is another one. So that is just how it is. When you see the drop down on each of the very first cell in each column, you will know that you have been able to apply your filter correctly. So that is just the importance of this filter. Now let's move forward and look at practical ways of applying filter to data. Now we have been able to get the drop downs for each of the columns of this data set. The next thing we'll be looking at is to probably try to delete the first row and see what happens to this data, because this first row contains name, type 1, type 2, ID, and then total. Assuming we delete this like I've done, right click and delete, look at what happens to the data. The filter is gone. And then if we now try to apply filter to this data, like I've done, let's see if this is meaningful. It is not meaningful because the name has been taken away, and then one of the names have now become the heading of that row, which is very wrong. And then look at the ID was taken away, and then the very first ID 1 is now a header. So that is just the danger of not assigning a row as header on your data set before conducting your filter. So I'm going to Ctrl Z or click this undo. So that is it. The essence of clicking the undo is to bring back our data in the right form where we are seeing the menu of each column. You can see from this, we have our ID, we have our name, we have our type 1, have our type 2, and we have our total. So this is how it should be. Now, let's look at filter options. The filter options allow sorting and filtering within the column of a data. And whatever that is done in one column extends to another. Okay, to further buttress my facts, let's look at sorting a filtered data. Now we have added filter to each of these columns. So this data is already on filter. Now let's look at how to sort within the filtered data. Ranges of data can be sorted and then relationship between the columns kept intact. This sorting is done either in ascending or descending formats. So let's take the very first column as an example where we have an ID. We click on the drop down menu so you can see sort smallest to largest, sort largest to smallest. Whatever we do on this very first column affects this other column B, C, D, and E. So let's take a look at this. This data is already in smallest to largest, the ID. So let's try largest to smallest and see what happens. So you can see it went back and started from the very last, which is 20, and then down to the very first, which is 1. And you can see that what we did affected these other columns. Let me undo so that you see how the data was originally. So you can see the very first ID, the name is Bulbasaur, and the type 1 is grass, and type 2 is poison, and then total is 318. So looking at this data now, I want to use the ID and sort it from largest to smallest. So you can see that by the time we do that, this Bulbasaur is not expected to be here because he is the first ID. It should be the last. So let's go ahead and do that. I've clicked on it and then sort largest to smallest. So you can see the last has taken the first position and then the first has taken the last position. We're seeing Bulbasaur and then grass, poison, and 318 there. So that is just how you can apply sorting to a column and then it extends to other columns. Let me undo now and then return our data to its original form. So next thing, we're going to look at filtering a data that filter has been applied upon. We have looked at sorting a data that filter has been applied upon. Now we want to look at a data set that has been filtered and then we want to filter that data. So let's see how this is going to help us. Filtering is a form of data analysis. If you are going to excel very well in data analysis, there is need for you to know how to filter your data, especially in Excel. You have to filter and then come up with the necessary data. At the end of this video, you'll be seeing how I have successfully analyzed this data and obtained a certain insight with this filtering command. So now let's look at this example. and see how we can apply filter. The first example we want to look at now is an example where we'll assume that our greatest interest on this data is the type 1. And then inside of the type 1, our interest is on this bug category. You can see the various categories. We have the grass category where we have 3 rows. We have the fire category where we have 3 rows. We have the water category where we have 3 rows. And then we have the bug category where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. And then we have the normal category where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's assume that our interest in this data is to obtain an insight on the bug category. So what do? We filter bug out of this type 1 column. So we click on this drop down menu, and then our interest is the bug category. So what we do is that we uncheck every other category here and leave behind only the bug category. So you can see it's only the bug category that is visible here. So the next thing we'll do, we'll click the OK and see what happens to the data. So looking at the data, we have been able to filter out the bug category alone in the type 1 column. And so having done that, you can see that the other categories are hidden because we never clicked on any delete command. How do you know? Look at this ID column. You can see the ID started from 1 to about 21, but what we are seeing here is 10, 11, 13, 14, 15. So what has happened to 1 to 9? And what has actually happened to 16 to 21? So that is just the effect of the type 1 bug filtering. So by the time we check every other category again, the data we return to normal. So that is just that. So moving forward, we can extend our filtering into another column, and then it will also affect the data. Let's assume that we want to filter out poison alone in the type 2 column. What will happen to our data set? Let's get about this as a second example. The second example here is that we want to assume that in the bug category, which we have filtered, the type 2 column, our interest is only on poison. So what do? If you only want to see poison bug, you have to ensure that you filter out only the poison in the type 2 drop-down and allow every other thing to be hidden. So let's just see this as our example 2 on this filter. So what we do is that we go to the drop-down on the type 2 and then we uncheck every other category except poison. So by the time we click OK, you can see that we have done another form of analysis on this data. Here in the type 2 column, what we are only seeing is poison. So this is the outcome of 2 different filtering. We have done filter on type 1, we also did filter on type 2, and it is visible here. You can see what has happened. Here you see filter sign on this drop down. You also see filter sign on this drop down. That's to tell you that the data before us is as a result of this and this filtered data. So looking at this, you can see that the other data sets are hidden. We are not seeing ID 1 to 12. We are not also seeing ID 16 below, because we have been able to modify this data. Let me now tell you the analysis that we have done so far. We have been able to obtain the name of a type 1 bug that its poison are between 195 to 395. So, assuming you're asked to determine the name of a bug poison that is having the highest amount, the highest number in the total column, you can easily obtain that from what we have done. Assuming you are asked that you should analyze and obtain the names of type 1 bug with the highest and lowest amount of poison, you have them before you now. The highest here is 395. The lowest here is 195. You can even go far and sort this very last column, the total column, in either ascending or descending, so that you have it the way you want it. Let's assume you want to filter it or sort it from highest to lowest. You can just click on this drop down and then you do largest to smallest. So you can see largest to smallest. What has been done here now is you have done sorting on this very last column. So you have largest as 395. So the name of the bug with the highest amount of poison is Bedri or Bidri. The name of the bug with the lowest amount of poison is Widow. So you have been able to answer data analysis question. And if you are asked to visualize this data, you can easily get it done. So looking at this data, as someone that will be doing more of analysis, I want you to understand three things on this data. Filtering have been done on two columns. So you see the filter icon here and filter icon here. And then sorting done on one of the column. So you see the sorting descending icon on this. You can see a very little arrow pointing downwards, meaning that the sorting was done in descending order. Assuming it was done in ascending order, you will see that arrow moving upwards. So this is just what I think you should know about the basics of analyzing your data using the filter command. Thank you very much for making that time to watch this video. My name is Chris Joko.